Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm the streamer on this channel, and we use this channel to build an app using Python and the Django web framework to build a software as a service. And I walk you through my journey with that process and explore what we can explore. Today we're going to be picking up on this brand new project that I started last week. I was having some serious internet issues, so it ended up being a recording, but I set up the start of a new project on Heroku, which is this aqueous Crag project. That's the URL that we're going to be working with, but that's what they gave us, so that's what we'll work with. And it is a very basic Django app right now. It's really not doing much at all. In fact, why don't we fire it up so we can get a quick view of what it looks like. So I'm in a Git repository that I created last time. I went through the scaffolding of the system and started at a point that everybody starts at, running the start project command, getting going, and I took it to the one next step of going ahead and putting it up on Heroku. That was last week's stream. So this week we are going to start to flesh it out and make it a more real project. But in order to do that, we need to get some pieces in place that are going to be crucial to helping us. I posted a postmortem today that resonated with a bunch of people, and I provided all sorts of lessons there. And one of my big lessons that I really learned that I'll reiterate here is that I want to be as minimal on this as possible. I want to do as little as I can to start to make an app that is actually useful for people in the homeschool world. Oh, thank you very much. Thrawn Leet. Well, welcome. I want that to be useful to my customers and not get hung up on all of the details that you can get easily sucked into with a lot of different technology. It's fun, but it doesn't actually serve the purpose if you don't have any customers on your platform. So that's my focus. But there's even saying that, there is a minimum that we have to set in order to actually be useful and put something up on the web. And that's what I'm trying to do today, to establish some of a couple of those tools, which are really going to be Python packages. They're not going to be external services, but they're going to be critical pieces of this moving forward. So you can see here, I've fired up the local development server. It's using gunicorn, which is what I rather than the standard run server command from Django. The purpose of doing that was to mimic the Heroku environment. So Heroku itself, if we are able to open the app online, and I don't remember the URL, so we're going to do it from Heroku open from the command line. This will boot up in a second because I'm on the free tier, but once it does, you can see it's this. And so my local environment and my production environment are going to be very similar, as similar as I can make them. And that should help any mismatch between things. So that's where we're at. And if you've done any Django before, this is the start page. I have no apps configured for this project. I've said this many times in many streams, but the Django structure and the terminology is project is the thing at the top, and apps are the components that go into that project, that are the reusable chunks that you can have and are a way to compose your system. So when I know we generally talk about online service as an app, but in Django land, that's the project. And so it's a bit confusing on the terminology front, but hey, that's what it is. So we're going to get into configuring a tool called django-environ in a minute, but I want to pause and say, like, if you want to keep up with me, I have a link up above to my website where you can join on my mailing list. This stuff all gets posted to YouTube later if you want to catch recordings that are there. Show notes get posted on my website as well. And if you want to reach out to me personally, I'm on Twitter as mblayman, and there is a Discord link below if you have questions that are bigger than Twitter, but don't necessarily need to send me an email or something like that. So that's a good way to reach me as well. Additionally, I do have a Patreon account. So if you're finding this to be useful and you want to throw a few dollars my way, I'm super up for that, of course. And I want to thank my patrons that I currently have, Mark and Patrick and Dylan. I appreciate you contributing. So that's getting that out of the way, and let's move on to what we actually need to do. So I have a GitHub Git repo here, and I've got some issues already put in there, and we're going to be focusing on this one first because it's pretty fundamental to doing anything going forward in terms of configuring our site. So if you've messed around with Django before, you know that everything gets dumped in one settings file, and that's where Django reads that. It's a Python file, and it can be anything. It can be booleans, it can be strings, it can be numbers, whatever. It's Python code, but you have to have some way to inject that. And there's a lot of strategies to do it, but one popular way is to follow the 12-factor app pattern, which is to read stuff from your operating system's environment variables. And that is under, I think, the config section where they talk about this. So this is a common pattern, and it's the one that Heroku actually applies to all of its applications. So we're going to follow suit. And it's possible to use Python's built-in OS module and read directly from the environment dictionary that's there. But there are some helpers that help make that easier, help deal with default variables, and all sorts of other things. And before I shut down my previous app, we had actually explored a couple of them, and I picked one over the other. I picked a different tool for that scenario because I was doing a lot more of this stuff myself. But since we're going to Heroku, the best tool for the job, I think, is going to be django-environ. And environ is, let me bring up the docs here so you can stare at it while I'm talking. It works in a pretty nice way where it reads your environment variables, and it tries to provide some conveniences that will make it easier to do local development as well as doing your production deployment. So you describe the environment that you care about, declare all the variables that you have, and then later on in your settings file, this is an example settings file, you use them by using the object that it gives back to you, and so on. So we're going to follow this pattern and update our requirements file to use this tool, and go from there. There's also announced today a security fix for Django. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first while I'm in here. You can keep up with Django news on forum.djangoproject.com. Of course, they have all their normal release channels, but this is turning out to be a pretty good way to do it, and you can get the details of the announcement and what happened. It's related to password resets or something like that. But I don't like being on an upgrade treadmill, as I called it in my article, and constantly upgrading packages. But I do feel it necessary to upgrade when I know of a security release. Like, I don't need to really be releasing insecure software to the world. So we're going to do that tonight as well. So let's stare at the code, shall we? This is my Vim terminal, and it's currently open to the settings file, but we're going to start by going to the requirements include file. And this is where I've got all of the pinned requirements, excuse me. The first one we need to update is change from Django 3.0 to 3.0.1. And that's that security release. So that's going to be the first thing there. And the next thing we need is the actual version number of django-environ. So I'm going to open up PyPI and find out what the latest and greatest is. So we can just use that. Looks like 0.4.5 is the version we want. And by the way, if you're new and you have any questions, My chat is open. Please use it and ask away. As long as you're courteous. Like I want to keep it civil. If you're going to be a jerk, just please don't. That's all I can say there. But it's there and available if you'd like to chat about something and you want some explanation on something. I'm happy to dig into the details of stuff. So we're adding django-environ. I think I spelled that right. Yeah, 0.4.5. In the last stream, I showed off that I'm using pip tools to make this work. So what's happening is this is the packages that I care about, but in order to make sure I install every package and have it basically be locked down so that Heroku installs exactly what I want, we're using pip tools to use this as something that we compile, which is why it's a requirements.in as an include, which is a homage to automake, if you are familiar with C++. So over here, what we actually need to do is generate our requirements txt file. And we do that by running a pip compile command, which I bring up from my history here. And what that will do is we'll go through the requirements include file, compare all the packages, look for all the dependencies of those packages, and spit out all the output. So what we have left is the updates there and the updates here. And it looks like django-environ doesn't actually have any dependencies. There's nothing else that it's pulling in. Okay, that's fine. So we've got those things, and I'm going to put them in the Git stage for now. And we also want to go ahead and install them so that they're actually useful. And changing Django, and should be installing another one of these as well. Yep, there it is. Okay, so our virtual environment now has the proper packages in place to get going. So let's do that. I'm going to come back to that settings file that we were just in. And right here, I will import the environ package, which is what they called it in the project. I'm going to look at the documentation because I honestly have never used this myself, but I've heard very good things about it. I haven't deployed to a Heroku app in a very long time. I've only done it for demo projects, so I know this is a good tool, but I've not done this extensively. So we want to, I'm going to actually take this because it's a good chunk of code. There's no need for me to type all that out and you all watch me type it. And they have some comments on what this is doing. So the first one is like, if it's describing how you want to cast it, because you have to remember environment variables, they are all strings by default. And so this is telling you what function it will run the string through before it will set it to that variable. So that means that if you have the debug environment variable, it's going to be called bool. Will be the input will be passed into bool, and you'll get out the output of that, and that will be what's in actual debug. And since this is Python and strings of any content are truthy, it could be called anything, and that would set debug to true. So, but we're going to default to it with false, and I'm not going to leave this comment in, but I'll talk about it now. So read env is a standard file convention. So if you want to have stuff that you don't check into source control and you want to ignore that file, you conventionally call it a .env file, and you can have whatever secrets you want in there locally without fear of putting that in your repository, because it is in the git ignore, I believe. Yeah, there it is. So it's going to ignore that file. So by just doing this much, we now have an environment available to us that will look for debug and give us a false value if we don't have it, but we still have to use it. You can see this big angry warning here saying don't run with true, which you might be like, well, what the heck, Matt? Why did you put up this thing? I did deploy to production with it being set to true, but there's nothing in it, and the stuff that is kind of sensitive I'm planning to change. I wanted to just get something all the way out there, knowing that none of it was going to matter later on. So I don't need the big scary warning because I know not to do that with Django, and I'm going to change this to be env debug. Okay, so now if I run this locally, this is going to default to false actually, and I don't believe there's nothing sensitive in my env file yet, so I can share that with you for now. So let's do that. And oh, I don't even have one yet. Okay, cool. So there's nothing in there yet, so it's not even reading anything. So if we restart Heroku with the Heroku local command that we used before, if we go to the URL that we were at on the local web server, I think this page should not come up anymore. Now it's 404 because we've not configured any routes. There's no home route. So this is the behavior that I would expect. Django doesn't know how to serve the root URL, so it's giving a 404. That's the right response right now. So this is good news, and it tells me that the environ module is doing its thing. And so we can also then test it out. Let's kill that for a second. And let's create an env file and put debug equal, and just to prove that it could be anything, I'm going to actually say, well, I won't say false because that would be too trolly, but something. And show that it runs through bool. It's not like, you don't have to say true. Like, that's not how this is working. It's running just through the bool command or the bool function, which will translate to a truthy value, I believe. So now we run Heroku local again, and looks like it did some logging here to say that it loaded the file. And ooh, sad. I was wrong. Okay. So let's figure out why I was wrong. Maybe it's trying to be more clever than I thought. Or maybe I'm wrong about the behavior of bool. Bool something. No, that's true. So what's going on? I'm going to do some print debugging. Okay. It's looking in the wrong area. That's the problem. It's not that I did this. Well, I did do it wrong. Let's be fair. It's not that I did the file wrong. It's that I put it in the wrong spot. So let's see. I don't really want to be putting an env file in the settings directory. That seems... Is that weird? It seems kind of weird. How do I tell it to read from a different place? Because I would like it to read from above, so I can just have it at the root, so that I can put like an env template in there if I wanted to, or something to that effect. So let's look for read env, and well, that's strange, because this would indicate to me that it's trying to find it relative to the managed py file, but the managed py file is in the root, which is where we put the thing. So Something is weird here. What a good start, right? Okay, let's see. We have base dir. Let's print base dir. Of course, is printing not working because I have... There it is, okay. I think there's also some... Gunicorn is also doing some buffering of the log output, which we might need to fix too. So base dir is saying that it's the homeschool directory. So I think that might be what I want to pass in, because it's looking above. Okay. So let's switch this around a little bit and say, we'll call it env file like they do. And we'll say os.path.join base dir with .env. And then put this guy below. In fact, let's do that there, right next to it. So let's try it again. Oh, come on. It's still reading from that path. Did I not pass it in? Ah. Well, don't I feel silly? Okay. Let's try it one more time with gusto. Now what? Not my day, it seems, tonight, guys and gals. Still claiming to be false. But notice it didn't complain about not finding the path this time. So it seemed to have found the path, but didn't like it. Well, that would be kind of weird if it has to be true, but willing to try that for a second. Well, that's strange. The question is, should we go down the rabbit hole and see why that is? Because it could be doing a bunch of magic that we might be worth knowing about for the future. Because if I just told you, I don't want to lie to you, if I just told you that I thought this should work, of having it be something and having that work, and it doesn't, that's clearly a hole in my knowledge. So something's weird. Well, something is normal, but something about my understanding is not correct. So let's do a little source diving, shall we? We want to go to... Oh, they do. Thank you. Usoda. Uisoda. I don't know how to pronounce yours. Sorry. Bool. Supported types. True, on, okay. Yes, yes. All right, well, I guess I was wrong. So you do have to have some kind of truthy looking thing. This feels more like YAML than it does what I would expect out of Python. Because I mean, clearly here, it's not following Python's truth rules. And maybe they figure that maybe there's some experience there that like that bit enough people that they went down the route of saying, yeah, it needs to be something that looks like true or false. Well, that's how it is. So we're going to change it. And just so I don't get confused that it is a Python variable in the future, because I could see myself in a few months being like, what the heck is this Python? I'm going to call it on, because I think that was one of the options. On. So let's try that. And come back over here. Okay, that worked. All right, sorry for the confusion. So what do we have now? We have a working environment thing pointed in the right area, and it's using debug correctly. And let's take out this print because we don't need it. And print is useful sometimes, but I think so. There's something happening here that we might want to set, and I think it is there's something with the G-unicorn buffering where it doesn't want it's waiting to flush out its buffer, so that's why we're not actually seeing the true until after I kill the process. I hit Control-C to kill it. And there's a way to tell G-unicorn to don't do that. So I'm going to refer back to my old project because I'm pretty sure I have it. Yeah, Python unbuffered. And let's take that and see if that's going to work here. I don't know, Heroku local might also be putting these env files, env things into the actual OS environment. So that's something else to check. So we'll see if this is turning on the behavior. And I guess I forgot to change the print. Let's put the print back on. And I'm getting tired of turning this off and on, so maybe Heroku local has a reload. Oops. Because it'd be nice to just let it run. I don't see one though. Well, that's too bad. Maybe we'll figure that one out some other day. For now, okay, see the behavior now, we automatically get the true printed out. So that's handy. So I'm going to leave that in the .env file. And delete that. Okay, so that's like step number one. The other thing that we need to do is to change the secret key. I'm okay putting a secret key that you all can see in this .env file over here. That's fine. But the secret key on the actual site that's on the internet needs to be something different. And it needs to be something different because Django uses the secret key for a bunch of things related to like hashing and security stuff. And if someone has your secret key, they can get into a bunch of your data. I don't remember all the specifics. I should probably look that up, but just know that it's bad news for other people to have your secret key, which is why they call it a secret key. So first thing I'm going to do is create a secret key over here, or a secret key in the env file, and we'll give it the value of everything that's in that that settings file. So that looks pretty nasty over there, but that's okay. And the other thing we need to do is change this to be like this. So I think if I remember reading the documentation correctly on OS django-environ, is if you don't specify the casting and the default value in the environment declaration itself, it expects this thing to exist and will raise an error if you don't have it. So we can actually, let's, just in the spirit of testing things out and seeing everything work, I'm going to delete this line for a second, but leave it in the settings, and we can try running that and see if it raises, yeah, blows up, says you don't have the secret key environment variable, which is not surprising. And now if we put it back, try it again. What is that? Set the 8dd environment variable? What is it talking about? I wonder if there is... Oh, you know what it is? There must be something, some kind of escaping. Oh, I think we've stumbled across one of the features of environments where you can use the syntax to reference other variables. So the fact that I have a $sign in the string value is like Django environment is trying to do something with it. So I guess it becomes a question of, I mean, we could either delete it and replace it with something else. That's one option, kind of a lazy option. The other option would be, how do you escape that thing? So let's see. Well, I don't. Well, keep going. This thing's not very big. Well, I don't see it. So let's try wrapping it in single quotes and see if that will escape it. That's could be one thing. If like it's trying to read it as a literal. Now it's doing something totally wacky. So I think what I'm going to do is just replace it with something that is not a $sign. I'm sure that's a useful feature, but at this particular moment, it's kind of annoying. And we wouldn't have hit it had the random generator produce something that didn't have a $sign in it. So there's a gotcha. Okay, it started up. And is it running over here? Yes, it is. Okay. That might be enough on that particular tool. We're going to use it more in the future, I'm positive, but the fact that we now have the ability to set configuration is really the goal that I was after on this particular step. And I don't want to spend a ton of time messing with this stuff because that's not the aim of the project this time around. So let's see what we've got. We can do a quick review on what's there and then move on to the next thing. So if we look at everything, we added this new environment object that we're starting to read from. And yeah, got some new requirements. So all good. And we can say use django-environ for configuration handling. And this fixes issue number 4 that I created. I think it was 4. Or was it 5? 5. Awesome. Next thing. The next thing we want to do is have the ability to inspect debug stuff. If you're new to Django, maybe you've never heard this, but if you're not, you might be extremely familiar with the Django debug toolbar. Debug toolbar is this little thing. It pops up in the upper right corner of your app as kind of a little overlay, and you click on it and a side panel slides open, and the side panel is full of information like how many queries were called in rendering that page view, what templates did you use, what environment information do you have, like a bunch of really useful stuff that I rely on and use quite heavily. So I want to make sure it's there and configured, and so we're going to add that. So we're going to put it in our requirements. It's not going to hurt to have it in just the general requirements. Some people might opt to have a separate requirements file and keep it differentiated, but having that extra little bit of code I don't think is really harming things. I mean, there's a tiny bit of risk there, I suppose, but because what I'm going to do is only enable it when the debug flag is on. And as I've noted, or if I didn't note it, I should, you don't want debug on in production because people can steal your stuff. They can do very little to get access to a bunch of information. So if we hide the debug toolbar behind the debug flag, then we should have the guarantee that debug toolbar is never available there either, because shame on me if I'm putting debug on in production. So let's go back into our requirements, include file, and back to PyPI to look for the Django debug toolbar. And it looks like the version is 2.1. So Django debug toolbar 2.1, and we'll run pip compile again to get the toolbar in there. And so it looks like the debug toolbar also depends on SQL parse, which Django itself was pulling in. So pip tools is saying you get both of them are dependencies to that thing. Okay, so next step is to install it. I had it cached locally, so that was fast. And now we need to configure it. So we have to have it as an installed app. And what else do we need in here? We need to have some URL stuff for it. Okay. We can do that. And we need to put in a middleware. We might need to change some IPs because we're not using localhost. Since we're using 0000, we might need to set that. But hopefully that should be the extent of it. So let's start with the installed apps section. And I'm going to, where should we put this? I'm wondering if we should put it all in one block or if we should have different blocks for the different chunks. I think one block probably makes more sense. And maybe for now, right after, so these are the installed apps and the middleware, which we're going to modify with this debug stuff. So we'll say if debug, because that should only be true when debug is on. And so we need to add it to installed apps. So we can append it to installed apps. We want to append debug toolbar. And we already are using static files, so that's all good. Let's put a comment here. Enable the debug toolbar only in debug mode. The other thing we need to do is put in the middleware. I don't think the middleware position matters. We'll get to the URL conf in a second stuff, because that's in a different file. Yeah, it looks like it just needs it. Oh, but it says you should put it in list early. Okay. We're not gzipping stuff here, so that's fine. Can we put it? I don't want to put it before the security middleware. That's maybe it doesn't matter for debug mode. This is not like secure mode Django here. So how do you prepend in a list? I can't ever. I've been doing Python for like 13, 14 years, and I can't remember how to prepend a list. So like insert 0 or something like that. Yeah, okay, insert 0. So we want to go middleware, insert 0, and we need the string. Okay, so that should be on the configuration side, but we also need to do the actual URL stuff. So the way debug toolbar works, well, what I know about it, and I'm sure there's tons of stuff that happens under the covers, but the part of it that it does is like it adds some special routes so that when you, for example, want to dig into the number of queries that it can do, I believe it does like an AJAX call to some of these debug routes. And we can trace that on the network tab if we want. It might be fun, actually. And it needs to have those routes available because by default, Django doesn't know about the debug toolbar. And so unless you have the routes there, it's just not going to be able to figure out what you're asking for. Oh, thanks for the follows, Go Guppy and Martin Peck. I appreciate it. Got my app on the side. I don't pay enough attention to it, so apologies if you did that earlier. So let's figure out this part here. We need to put it in our URL conf file and add it, update the patterns. And you can see what I'm talking about. The stuff that it follows this kind of prefix convention of putting it in under debug. So that's what we need. So I'm gonna actually copy, I'm gonna steal that block of stuff. And we're gonna go up and then into URL patterns and do this. And why is nothing complaining loudly? Hold on a second. I don't have my virtual environment activated there, so it doesn't know how to complain about imports. Still doesn't know. Maybe I don't have Flake installed. Okay, do that later. So we're missing the settings. So that's in conf. So we say from Django conf import settings. So that solves this guy here. And then it's got debug toolbar already. It's got path already. We don't need that stuff. That comment. And if you noticed, it might have like jumped on you there. I have black running on my editor, so every time I save my file, it's getting auto formatted to be in black formatting, which is why it got compressed into this thing. So that's enough there. There might be one more change on internal IPs that we'll check in just a second. Let's see if this did it without doing that though. Alternatively, we might be able to change Unicorn because I don't need it to be on broadcast. Oh, include, not defined. Oops. Ah, okay, so I think that is in with the URLs area. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So let's try again. Okay, it all imported this time. That's good. And oh, you know what's happening? So we're now hitting another. Let's go to the admin for a minute. So because we now added our first app of the toolbar, that's an interesting thing to have it be your first app. That first introductory page is only when you have no apps installed. So what it's saying is like, there's no route here. And it's trying to tell us that. It is telling us that we did properly register the debug routes. And hopefully there's the built-in admin so that we'll actually have something to look at in a minute. But if we go like this, it gets us to the admin page. Still nothing there though. The thing that we're looking for is a little black box that is right over here in the upper right. So that tells me that this is a little bit wrong, and we need to fiddle with stuff. I could change the gunicorn. Could I? No, I don't think I could. I think I was about to say I could change the gunicorn IP on what it would serve. Maybe we can do that to test, but I don't think that Heroku would like that. I think he wants gunicorn to be broadcasting, because as using a platform as a service, the computer that is actually running my app on Heroku needs to be able to talk to the outside network. So if you're only doing local host communication on gunicorn, it's not going to actually be able to talk to the rest of Heroku's stuff, and your app won't appear. So I'm going to go to the proc file where gunicorn is though for a moment, and just for a moment change it to use localhost. So let's stop that, and I don't remember the incarnation and gunicorn to get the port and localhost, so let's look that up real quick. There it is, B for bind. So we want to do basically this, but with 5,000 to keep it on the same port. So I'm going to do at the end -B bind to 5,000. And so we can start Heroku local again. And now you can see it's changed from the broadcast of 0000 to 127.0.0.1, which is localhost. And if with any luck, the debug toolbar will appear. And it did not. So something's going on there. That's not quite right. Yeah, it didn't even load it. Because I'm pretty sure it will load on the admin page. I believe that's true. As a place to test it. Because I kind of think it kind of like injects itself over everything. So something's missing here. Well, let's go. Since this little experiment didn't work, let's kick that out. Because it didn't necessarily bring us closer as far as we know. So I think what I want to do instead is figure out the rest of the configuration with this internal IP stuff. Oh, okay. So I was wrong because we didn't even have internal IPs set to localhost. So let's go back to the settings area. It's not even defined. So what is I'm guessing the default for Django is to have internal IPs be an empty list. Yeah, default is an empty list. Yeah, that's useful, Google. Cool. All right. So we know that the value that we really need is the broadcast address. So what I want to do is come back to this setting and then say internal IPs, just for the debug mode, I want it to include 0000. And I don't think it needed to include the port, right? It doesn't mention the port, so we're going to try it without. And if it does still not work, then we'll try it with the port. Okay. I think we're getting there. That's the live site, so let's not do that. Oh, come on. So maybe it needs the port. I don't know that to be true. Kind of guessing at this point, but it's a reasonable guess. There's a bit of like, almost like magic around this particular aspect. There's nothing that says like, well, this didn't work. And I suppose we could fire up a debugger and step into stuff and see which aspect of debug toolbar is failing. And maybe we would have to if we want to get down to that. Or it could be, no, none of these, all of these are just related to admin. What else could be wrong? Let's go to the documentation and see what else it might say. And we'll review this as we have it too. All right, so we've definitely installed it. We have static files there, and it should be set up properly. I haven't done anything to. Ooh, I say that, but we switched to G-Unicorn. Huh. All right, here's another test we're going to do. We'll leave that commented out for just a moment. I'm going to change this back to localhost. And I'm going to change, it's coming back to me. I think there's something else that we have to do for G-Unicorn to get static files to work the way we'd expect. So what I'm going to do is go back to the proc file, and we're going to switch for a moment. No. We're going to switch this to be using manage PyRun server. And the reason for that is I think that manage PyRun server is doing some static file handling for us that G-Unicorn is not by default. So we can open up port 8000 now. Ah, yep. So look, check this out. This is the toolbar, and apparently it even shows up on the 404 page. I forgot about that. So when it's hidden, it shows up with this little tiny DT button thing over here. So as in django-debug-toolbar. And when you expand it out, it has all of the stuff that ran: templates, static files, SQL queries, etc., etc., etc. And now I'm also curious. Let's bring up the network, reload it, see what it called. Okay, it loaded some images. That's not the interesting part. What happens if I click the button. Does it do Ajax? No, didn't do it there. How about this? Ah, yeah. So it did an Ajax call to this render panel thing, and that's what those debug routes are doing. So anytime it's actually displaying something for you that gets into the details about this stuff, that's how it works. So, but there's a problem, clearly. The fact that we have not figured out how to do static files properly. And I want to say this is something that took me a while to get right. So I'm going to refer back to my other project. It's handy having another project where you spent 3 years working on it. There's a lot of accumulated knowledge in there. So let's find, where is it going to be though? Project, nope. Okay. What did I end up calling it? Let's search for debug. Settings. So this is the file we're interested in. Come on. Open. Static. I apologize for this little tangent. Maybe it was in URLs file. It was a funny way of loading the static files, because the managed Py run server knows that it's really intended not to be used as a production server. So it's trying to do the static file handling for you, looking at your static root directory for the files that it needs, and then just like automatically loading those. And I remember gunicorn didn't get that quite so nicely, so I had to do some extra stuff here. So here it is, right here. It's I had to load the patterns and call static files URL patterns. I think that might be it. Yeah. So I'm going to take this line and go back to this debug section, because I'm only interested in doing this for Heroku and for gunicorn locally. So we'll put it in here. I think it's the right place for it. No, it's not. It's in the. I just finished saying that it goes somewhere else. Sorry. It goes in the URLs file. But the debug aspect of that still is what I want. So we'll put it here. And the other line that I think we need is this guy of calling static files URL patterns. And I apologize, I'm not going into all the details of why that is right now, but I don't think it's terribly important to dig into that. Hopefully this just does what we need it to. So let's go back to gunicorn for a moment. And with any luck, there it is. Okay, cool. So that was it. Something about static files. Again, don't remember all the details, but if you're starting your own project and you're using gunicorn as your local web server, and instead of run server, it might actually be related to your static files. So we can close this guy. And what does that leave us with? I think that's the debug toolbar. I think that's done. So what do we have? It took a little bit of configuration in the settings to add the toolbar as an app and put in the middleware. Internal IP. That's how did this work? Maybe debug doesn't care about. Okay, now I'm. What the heck happened? Because this seems like it shouldn't have worked. Because if it's saying you need to match the internal IP, I didn't do that. One was 0000 and one is localhost. So let's make sure that this is still working, or if we even need the setting. It seemed like we do, but maybe we don't. Okay, it's gone. Even though that setting is there that way. Let's switch it around. How did this work if one was broadcast and one is localhost? Maybe that's something about the way debug toolbar is working. Whoa. I broke some other stuff. Oh, it didn't. It was just going slower. Would you look at that? What is it doing? That was ridiculous. The delay on that was no good. It's kind of like insufferably bad, in fact. Well, refresh again. Seems to work. But not every time. What is it doing? It's like one of them hits a bad call and takes 5 seconds to load. That seems weird. Let's search for it. So I'm not running white noise yet, I don't think, or maybe I am. It's something that's to the point where if it's going to be to that level of bad, like that's just going to slow us down. So don't want to do that. So it's talking about the white noise middleware. Okay, this might be a good time to bring up Django Heroku. Something that Django Heroku does, that's a tool that I installed in the last stream to help with Heroku, is do some automatic configuration for you, and it defaults to a bunch of things. In fact, I want to turn this one off, which we'll get to in a second. It will try and set up static files for you automatically. So it sets that to true. And what it's doing is adding, and it's happening at the bottom. So white noise is coming before the debug toolbar here. And that might be the problem. What did that issue say? What was the order? It works better if it's after white noise. Huh. What to do? Because the other option is to make this so that it will only come on if debug is true and the toolbar is true. So I could basically leave it in an off state and just kind of toggle it on when we need it. That may be desirable for now. So I'm gonna say we'll leave this is if debug clause, and we're gonna add an if a toolbar condition. So we'll say debug toolbar. And in order to do that well, I want to put debug toolbar here as a new env thing. Wow. Debug toolbar. And we want it to come on in the same way as debug. Black's probably going to flatten that again, but yeah, okay. There'll be enough of these settings eventually where black will give up trying to make it one line, and we'll put it all in multiple lines. So we're going to have this default to false. So I haven't put that in my environment file yet. So if we kill that, then and turn this back on, the toolbar should go away. Yeah, and we're back to good performance. That's super weird. That's annoying. No offense to debug toolbar people, it's a hard project to maintain, I'm sure, but that's a curious one where that performance goes down so poorly. Not sure why that is. I don't know what blocks it. Okay, we'll fret about that later. Let's make sure that it still works though. Let's go back to the env file and put debug toolbar to on, and turn that back on and refresh, and there it is. So it worked that time, but it's just getting like one of those requests is hitting something that's causing it to bomb out and like destroy the performance of everything else. That's strange. That one was fine, that one's fine, and then boom. That's a weird one. But the fact that we can turn it off and on, I'll leave it on for now, but if it's getting something that, let's say I'm doing some UI design or something and want to be able to iterate super fast, and I don't want debug toolbar to get in the way, that might be a good time to disable it. So we'll have it on, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so, I guess we should, if we're putting it on here, we should also do that in the URLs file. If we don't, it's going to add this stuff when it might be off, and then I'm surprised that that didn't blow up when it was off. Okay. Cool. That gets us to those two tools. So I think we're getting close to a wrapping up point tonight, but let's talk about what's left to do. And maybe I will push this up, and I think we'll see it fail on Heroku because it will be missing something. It should give us a 500 message because debug will be off on Heroku. And then we'll be able to look at the logs, because what should be missing is the secret key. So first of all, let's finish off this bit of the debug toolbar. So we've got the debug toolbar added and configured as an installed thing. We've got it in the settings and the URLs to help us out. we've put it in our requirements. So we'll say add djdt. That's what they call it. There is one other change I want to make before we try it out on Heroku itself, and that's to go back to settings, go to the Heroku config thing here, and I want to turn off the secret key fetching because we're doing that with django-environ now, and I don't want Heroku to try. So we're going to say, I think it was secret key to false. So if you look at this function that is what we're calling at the bottom of the settings file, it's this settings function. And it takes the entire configuration as the first parameter, and then has these keyword only arguments. That's what that star means. Everything after it has to be defined with a keyword argument, and secret key is set to true. And each of these is set to true, in fact. So it's trying to help you out by turning on each of these things in Heroku. But I don't want it to do that, because if you look at the secret key stuff, it is like it's needlessly overwriting the work that django-environ already did. And that's pointless. So we're going to say secret key equals false, and this should still start up and be fine. Yep. And it is. So that's all good. And so I want to commit that little chunk and say, what do I want to say? Django Heroku ignore secret key management, because we know we've proactively made the choice to handle it ourselves. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is git push to Heroku master, and that's deployment in this world, which is really the nice thing. When we go back to our app, we will see that we should see a 500, and we'll check the logs, and the log should tell us, I hope, that that something is missing. Oh, good. It happened before we even got there. Yeah, that's exactly what I expected. So the key is not there in the app project. So the next thing I want to do is actually show you how I'm going to set the key. I'm going to show you how to get the variable and then where to set it, and then I might deploy it, and then I'm going to replace it, because at that point it won't really be something that I need to publicly expose. Can I even show that much? Well, we'll go through the process. So you in Heroku can set your settings in the dashboard. So here's my app here, Acquiesce Crag, and if I click settings, there's nothing you can take advantage of here. If I click this button, which I'm not going to do right now, it will show me that environment variable. And I have to set the secret key in order to make the app work. So that's why deployment, I think, failed, because there was this wasn't defined in the environment, and as it tried to run collect static, the django-environ command blew up because it couldn't find that thing, and we told it you have to find that thing. So I want to run Heroku run manage.py. Is that right? No, that's not what I want. Yeah, that was wrong. That's running on the actual dyno. I want to run something locally, so we don't need that. I don't know what I'm thinking. We want to fire up the shell, and what I want to do is, I found this earlier. I was looking for, I want to make a secret key, And there are tons of ways to make the secret key, but I just want to use the same kind of technique that that Django itself used. And I found that is in a utility in the core management area. So the Django start project command uses this utility function to generate a new key, which then if you dig deep into it, this get random string thing uses the some crypto kind of stuff to make sure that it's a nice and secure key. So I'm going to generate a 50 character key to follow suit with what Django does with these things, and import this from Django core management import utils. And you should be utils generate secret key, something like that. Get random secret key. So if you ever needed to do this yourself, you can know one place you could look to generate a key. I mean, there's lots of ways to do this, but it's one place. So here's a value that we can put in there. And I'll put one in for now, but I'm going to change it after this stream is over. So if you're coming back in later, hoping to ruin my day, the secret key will be different. So let's see if this little screen is still working. Okay, I should be able to do stuff without y'all seeing what I'm working on. Yeah, that seems to be up. So I'll speak through it since you can't see my screen at the moment, but I'm going back to the Django dashboard and I'm going into the config variables. And the reason I couldn't show it the first time is because there's already a database URL in there that has a username that I don't want to expose, a password that I don't want to expose, and that stuff's already visible. You can at least see part of it, and I just don't need to do that. So I'm gonna it's just a simple form that takes a key and a value. So I'm gonna give it a secret key as the name, and then paste in the value. And I'm gonna actually look carefully at this and make sure there are no dollar signs, because that's gonna ruin our day. That did earlier. So that is now in there, and I think we can come back and I can turn this back on. Yep, so you should be able to see everything. And we will do a git push to Heroku master again, which should deploy things out. And when we visit the site, the root URL is going to be a 500 or a 404 because, again, we haven't put anything there. But I think we should be able to get to the admin page, or at least the login page. So that should be kind of a useful ending point for this. Error reading something. I don't know what that is. Oh, it's looking for an env file. Okay, so this is it's just a warning. It's saying if you're not configuring your environment separately, we're configuring it through Heroku, then check this. So this is, I think this is something that we can safely ignore. Yeah, that should be okay. So Heroku opens our site, and it's not found. But we should be able to go to admin, and we get the Django admin. And notice there is no toolbar over here. So debug mode is definitely off. That's all good news. So the app is secure, not totally secure at the moment. Because I will come back in and change the secret key to a different value. But the idea is there that it's reading the secret key from the environment variable that is set in the Heroku dashboard area, so that we have the ability to control that setting there and keep it private. I think that's where we'll wrap up for today. Next week is Christmas, so I will not be streaming next Wednesday. Am I getting that right? Got the right date? I'm pretty positive. Yeah, Christmas. And so I will likely stream again on New Year's Day. It'll be fun. Bring in 2020 with getting into actual guts of starting to build out the app. So the next thing we're going to work on, and go back to my list of issues, is the actual account creation. So it's possible to use Django out of the box to create user accounts and stuff, and that's an important functionality. But if you want to integrate with other services in the future, like maybe perhaps you wanted to do kind of a account creation with Google accounts, or there's all sorts of vendors, but Yahoo, I don't know, wherever you want to. Oh, Facebook's probably a more realistic example than Yahoo. I don't know why that one came to off the top of my head. But if you want to be able to create through different social accounts, there is a really cool project called Django All-Auth. And Django All-Auth enables a lot of things. One of the things that it does is makes it so you can pretty easily change from the default Django of username password into a mode where you want to do like an email as the username. And that's where I want to go with this project. I think in 2019 and then moving into 2020, using emails as a username is a totally reasonable path to take, and I can do additional stuff like verification if I wanted to, but my goal is to just get in the basics of doing email as username into the system, and we're going to use Django All-Auth to do that. I think we're now in a good position to integrate this thing, especially that we've got debug-toolbar and we've got django-environ in there, so it's easy to do configuration, and it's easy to check on the state of template rendering and see if any problems are happening. So that will be a useful utility there. So that's the plan. That's what's going on next time. I will post this recording up on YouTube after this is over, and put together some show notes. So if you miss something and you want to catch it later, and maybe you like reading through these things easier anyway, that stuff will be there. You can catch up with me on Twitter. I'm MB Lehman there, and follow me on YouTube or Twitch as you see fit. I appreciate that. That helps me reach out to others and get discovered. So hope you enjoyed what we did tonight, and I'll see you next time. Take care.